we live? Yay, we're live. Excellent. And I must remember that bit where it says one participant, that's telling me that I'm here. And I know I'm here. So, sorry, I wanted to take a picture of the screen as I was going live because I've never got around to doing that before. Little warm-up dram for me. Evening, Ryan. So I'm just having a little warm-up Glenkeith just to get my palate warmed up. And my forehead is already plenty warmed up, as are my arms. It's been rather hot here. Even Callum, how are you? Pizza and whiskey. That's a good combination, Ryan. I'll just give it, I think, let me see. No, wrong thing. Switch to participants. That's weird. It says there's 4, but yeah, whatever. I get this YouTube live thing confuses me. It really does confuse me. It works weird, but whatever. It's no worth getting hung up on. So we did these tastings. We did these whiskies. Sorry, last week on the Zoom tasting with the guys. They went down well. Some interesting drams. Very different from some of the other stuff that we've had. Yes, Ryan, we do have another day of summer. I know it's weird. I think we've had like 3 this year so far, which is kind of scary in a way. It kind of makes me worried about what kind of winter we're going to end up with if we've had several days of summer. That's scary. I'm trying to figure out where to put my notes. That's not working. Fine, they can sit there. So let's get some whiskey going. So first up is the Nika Days, and I'm holding it up and it back to front. So the Nika Days is the first one that we're going to go for. This one replaced the Nika from the barrel, which was on the original list, but I realized very quickly that it was sold out. That is kind of the tradition. I have to pick something every time that turns out to have sold out. So that's always good. So yeah. Nika Days is a blended whiskey. We've got spirits from Miyagi-Kyo and Uchiha distilleries. As we talked about on the Zoom tasting, I've never felt more out of my depth with talking about whiskies than I did last time talking about these Japanese whiskies. And I was, trying to kind of catch up and make sense of what was happening and what we were tasting kind of as we went. So that's cool. It's quite good fun. So it's quite sweet on the nose. This one is a blended whiskey. So we've got single malt and we've got single grain. I'm pretty sure this one is all Japanese liquid. One of the things we talked about is that Japanese whiskey is not necessarily always from Japan. It's not Japanese whiskey. Very often, Japanese distillers will buy new make spirit from Scottish distilleries, American distilleries, from wherever else. They'll take it over to Japan, they'll mature it, and then it gets blended together. This one, I'm fairly sure, is all Japanese liquid. So the nose on it is really quite light and fruity. So there's apples and pears. You guys getting anything else interesting? Has everybody got the drams? Everybody who's in, have you all got the drams? I know Ryan does. He remembered to hang on to some after last week's tasting. Excuse me. Pollen up here has been a pollen. Hey! That was truly a pollen. Sorry, I will try to stop doing that. And I'm kind of stuffed up. A big part of what I get on the nose on this is oak and leather. Which reminds me, that was something I was talking to one of my colleagues about. We're running on a relatively skeleton staff at Tomatin at the moment. And we had one of our normally seasonal tour guides came back to work for us at the weekend to fill in. And I was having a chat with her, and we tasted one of the whiskies. We were trying to pick out some notes on it. And one of the things we were talking about was leather. And she went, problem is, I don't really know what leather tastes like. So we then got into this conversation where I was like, how as a child did you not chew leather? And then I realised I was the one who sounded weird at that point. I offered to let her have a chew on my watch strap. Strangely, she declined. So I told her she had to go home and find a belt and chew on it. Yeah, orchard fruits. Yeah, I can see that. I can see where you're coming from with that. There's a bit of lemoniness, definitely. But it's really nice and gentle on the nose. So after last week's tasting, I wrote down ginger spice, which is the main thing I'm being hit with at the moment, is that ginger spiciness. There is a little bit of maltiness in there as well for me, but it's predominantly that ginger spice that I'm getting. So an interesting dram. There's a sort of roasted nut flavour in there as well, which is quite unusual. The finish, what, not baby or scary? Sorry, Ryan, that took me a moment. Not baby or scary. You totally get my humour. No, not baby or scary spice. Ginger spice. Definitely ginger spice. All in all, this is a nice dram, and it went down. Do I have the scores from last week? See, this is me. Yes, no, I don't. I think I binned this. Annoyingly, I binned the scores from last week. But this one went down pretty well. This one's £35 a bottle. So actually, I think that's good value for this dram. It's a nice dram at that price range. So yeah, definitely one to look out for. It's 40%. It's typical blended, so it's relatively low in alcohol, but it's really pleasant. Dram number 2 is the Cheetah. Now this is produced by Suntory. For relaxing times, make it Suntory time. I am no what's his name? Bill. Can't remember his name. Bill, what's his face? That was I'm just talking rubbish now. This is the thing about this format is that it's weird not having the feedback. So I end up just talking nonsense. So, the Cheetah. It is a Japanese single grain. It's matured in sherry, bourbon, and wine casks. There's some green tomato notes. A little bit of grape, some grass on there as well. So quite an interesting nose, quite heavily sweet nose. Coconut, and I'm getting a bit of corn as well. Not surprising, given that it's single grain, so there will be a decent amount of corn in the mash bill for this. So not a huge surprise that there's a lot of corn going on in the nose. I'm annoyed that I didn't, hang on, I'm going to check in this notebook that I didn't keep those notes, because I'm kind of surprised I didn't keep the scores. Bear with. Nah. No, not in there. Not in there. So I have, and the bin has been. The bin has been emptied. This one was an 8 for you. Okay. Taste-wise, honey, corn, a lot of corn. I think I'm coming to the conclusion that I'm really quite susceptible to corn notes, and I pick them up on anything with even a little bit of corn in the mash bill. It is quite thick, and there's a little bit of barrel char in there as well, and that barrel char carries on into the finish. It's a very different whiskey from the last one. It's a heavier whiskey. It's a bigger whiskey, and in terms of flavour, there's a lot more going on, and that barrel char just changes things significantly. The finish is not super long, but it's a decent length of finish, but it's predominantly that barrel char that I get. When you say corn, what can you like in the flavour to nut? Hang on a second. Mrs. Drum Dabbler, say hello.
Hello. Sorry, I'm noisy. I'm trying to sneak in and you're going away. Bye
yeah. Yeah, Ryan, is that kind of nacho flavour, that kind of corn chips, probably like plain popcorn, that sort of flavour. But yeah, somewhere in that kind of range. This one's 40 quid, 43%, non-age statement. Price-wise, I think it's okay. I think that's an okay price for this whiskey. I wouldn't want to pay any more for it. If I could pick this one up on offer, then actually I think I would be tempted by a bottle of that whiskey. Ryan, obviously I know you were a fan of it, based on the fact you've just told me you were a fan of it. So, dram number 3. And we are getting into the realms of Japanese whiskey that isn't strictly speaking Japanese whiskey. This is Hatzaki pure malt. Now, a pure malt is a phrase that we no longer use in Scotland. It was used a little bit. It was never hugely used, and they were never particularly popular. But a pure malt is what is now in Scotland known as a blended malt. So pure malt became vatted malt, which has ultimately become blended malt in Japan. It's a phrase that they're still using. And this is a whiskey that uses whiskey that's not just Japanese. The spirit was matured in bourbon casks, sherry casks, and Mizunara casks, which is Japanese oak. And they're pretty rare, the casks. They're hard to get hold of. They're pretty hard to get out of Japan. You're not going to find many of them making their way over to Scotland to mature Scotch. The Japanese hold on to them. 46%, this one. Super pale. Ryan, I think this might be the one that you referred to. If they did colour it, then they should ask for their money back because it's not worked very well. It is very well hydrated. It is, yes, super hydrated. It's a very light, it's a very sweet fruitiness for me. Really quite estery. Notes that actually I find quite reminiscent of a lot of new make spirits in terms of the fruitiness that you're going to find on a new make spirit. More smoke and oak. Interesting. Taste or nose, Ryan? For me, it's apples. I wrote down flower shop, which is another random tasting note, and a bit of malt loaf. Oh, I'm getting way more spice on this tonight. I'm guessing I'm probably kind of dehydrated, which is why I'm getting a lot of spicy notes coming through on a lot of them. I'm pretty sure it was Ryan. So Ryan just asked, was this old granny? And yes, I'm pretty sure this was the one. So the aroma is like old granny's perfume. That really cheap, awful perfume that you'll often find grannies wearing. It's a little bit of that. Yes, yeah, that's definitely. This is definitely the one. I'm getting a bit of a burnt taste as well. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this one. This one would be the one that I scored lowest, I'm pretty sure, last week on the tasting. There's nothing, for me, there's nothing that I like about it. The nose is quite pleasant, but it's not brilliant. Taste-wise, it's a little bit bitter. The finish is kind of short. Yeah, it's not. This one has not done anything for me at all. And at $44.75, which suggests to me that this was on offer when I checked the price, I would not be keen to buy a bottle of this. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I actually saw this one on Amazon for Prime Day, and on offer. So it was probably in the 30s, I think. And even that, I wouldn't pay it. It really didn't do anything for me at all. So let's move on to dram number 4, which is the Uchiha. This is a single malt, and we're getting into the drams that all of us really started to enjoy an awful lot more. So the Uchiha, and I really love the crest on this bottle. It looks really super snazzy. A couple of lions and some antlers and a head. Yeah. Yeah, Ryan, I kind of agree. So the Uchiha, this one is 45%, non-age statement. I couldn't find anything about colouring or chill filtering, so at 45, it's touch and go whether this is going to be chill filtered. More than likely. Coloured, certainly not a lot. So, on the nose. There is a gentle peatiness to this. Just a touch. There's a definite brininess in there. And I feel like I could be more specific than just briny. It's seaweedy and briny. It's like wet fishing nets. There's a lemon drizzle cake aroma, and there's a little bit of chocolate as well on the nose. The nose on this is really pretty interesting. There's quite a lot going on. Salted tomato puree. Yeah, I can get the tomato, actually, yeah. Let's give it a taste. There's some peatiness, there's some smokiness, a little bit of spiciness, again, which I'm getting a lot tonight, as in not ketchup. I know, yeah. Ryan, we do have tomato puree in Scotland. We do know what it is. We don't just have ketchup. The finish is quite long. It's salty. There's a little bit of the smoke in the finish as well. Not a huge amount. This is not super smoky, not by any stretch of the imagination. But there is a little bit of that smoke appears there in the finish. That one I am keen on. I do like that whiskey. However, at 65 quid, that takes the liking of it down just a little bit. And I say that because I know the other whiskies that I could get for 65 quid. Or I know some of the other, there's other whiskies I could get for 65 quid, which I would choose over that whiskey. It's not one that I would pick. Not just sweet tomato, salt tomato. It's better than last week. It's interesting how they do, how they have changed. And it also demonstrates, and it's one of those difficult ones, has the whiskey changed? Or how much of it is that we have changed? Because I'm picking out way more spice, as I've said tonight, on everything. And obviously, I'm pretty dehydrated, going by my colour. So it just shows you how much things can change depending on how you're feeling and what's going on with you on a given day. Yeah, right. I kind of knew that's what you meant, Ryan, but I couldn't miss the opportunity to take the piss. I never miss up and I do that. I'll try speaking. I never miss an opportunity to take the piss. You should have realised that by now. Slight oxidation. See, now we're getting into. I don't buy it. I mean, okay, so this is my next one. To be fair, but that's about the amount that I try to leave. It's probably slightly less than half. So okay, in the grand scheme of things, that your oxygen to spirit ratio is relatively high. No, I realised that's what you meant. But yeah, that's the thing. I don't think it can. I don't think that amount of whiskey in that smaller container. I don't buy it. I just don't. I don't buy it. I am now. What I'm going to have to go and do. How can I test this? How can I test this? So, I am going to go and test this. So I'm going to take two of these little bottles, and I will put the same whiskey in each of them. One of them I'll fill to the brim, so that there can't be any oxidation, and I might even open a fresh bottle to do it, so there can be no oxidation, so that cannot happen. And the other one I will half fill, and I'll leave them for a week, and I'll record a TikTok about it actually, because it's an interesting one, and it also ties into the whole neck pour thing. So the neck pour thing is, people believe that the first pour of a bottle is not as good as the rest of the bottle. The theory being that you remove that first bit of liquid from the top of the bottle, and that then allows the whiskey to oxidize a little bit more, which I just don't buy. I really don't buy it, particularly not when you've got 700 ml, you've taken off 50 ml. I don't, and the bottle is sealed. Don't get me wrong, if the bottle's open, totally different thing, totally different. But when it's sealed, and yes, for science. It is definitely for science. So I will tomorrow. I'll record the making the bottles up, and I'll give them a week, and I'll see what happens. I am interested to try it to see how it changes, and if it does change. We've interestingly to a nerd, we did a little comparison at work the other day. So in the bar in the visitor centre. First pint of a keg. Really? Yeah. See, I never ever noticed that in the pub. Ever. And the thing is, yeah. So you're not, I mean, fine. I mean, fair enough. But I've never noticed a difference. I'm guessing you have, but I never have noticed a difference in the first pint to the last pint. I mean, as long as it's within a sensible time frame, obviously. But yeah, but that's fine. I'll just need to follow you around when you're going drinking, and every time there's a new keg goes on, I'll have the one that you're abandoning. That's fine. I don't mind playing into the Scottish mooch stereotype. Don't mind that at all. Okay, that's fair enough. If it's superstition, totally different thing. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. I was talking about glasses. In the visitor centre at Tomatin, we use spey glasses, which are kind of like a cut-off Glencairn, effectively. The flaring is not so, this bulbousness is not so apparent. It's a much kind of closer to a straight edge on it. And we compared the spey glasses to Glencairns, and the difference was quite incredible. Both my manager and I found that we enjoyed the whiskey more on the nose from the Glencairn. With the spey, we were getting more of an ethanol hit from it. I then continued that experiment, and that was when we were discussing leather on Sunday. That sounds dodgy. Leather flavour, that also sounds... I'll move on. And interestingly enough, my two colleagues that I was trying it with both preferred the nose from the spey glass. Interestingly, the spey glass gave kind of a much bigger hit on the nose. The Glencairn was a little bit more subtle, and it allowed for more of an opportunity, I found, to really get my nose in and give it a good nosing. That sounds... Why is it with me and innuendos? Anyway, let's move on to the next whiskey. If I can manage to not throw it across the room. So our final dram of this Japanese tasting is the Yamazaki Distillers Reserve. That's it. Focus it, yeah. Now this one is a single malt, and this one was matured in Bordeaux wine casks, sherry casks, and there is also malt that was matured in Mizunara casks. So a number of kind of typical Japanese maturations. So much richer, this one. Adding water. See now I'm gonna have to do a bit more sciencing, right? Yeah, I do like having to science for whiskey. It's really tough that somebody has to science for whiskey. I think, Ryan, we might have to get hold of some spey glasses for the nostril tour and do a proper experiment. So this one is 43%. NAS, don't know coloured. Probably, in fact, it will be chill filtered. At 43%, it's going to be chill filtered. So the nose on it. It's got a really nice summery, fruity nose. Raspberries and a bit strawberries. A bit coconut in there. So I'm not a fan of the spey glass, and that's what you're talking about, I'm guessing. And part of the reason for that is what I like about the Glencairn is that you've got that base to hold it by. The same goes for any kind of stemmed glass, but it means it's far easier for you to actually look at the liquid. You can see the liquid far more easily that way, rather than ending up with loads of fingerprints all around the glass. It also means that when you're holding the glass, you're not warming up the whiskey, whereas the spey glass, you kind of have to hold the glass. Alternatively, you're holding it. So it would be like trying to hold this by just its base. And it just feels super awkward. So I'm more of a Glencairn fan when it comes to a nosing glass. Although I drink all my whiskey out of Glencairns, I don't drink them out of rocks glasses anyway. So that's neither here nor there. There's a little bit of coconut on there. Quite creamy. Not a note that I made. Yeah, fair enough, Ryan. Fair enough. They do feel suitable to sip from, to be fair. Nice little pocket bottles for just a single shot. I just realised there's a little bit of whiskey left in the bottom of that one. Heaven forbid. I found this a lot creamier tonight than I did last week. This raspberry in there, a bit of vanilla, a little bit of herbaceousness, so like a rosemary or sage, that kind of herby kind of note. This one went down pretty well last week. We were all pretty keen on this one, but it's 70 quid. And unlike the Uchiha at 65 quid, I feel I can get far more interesting bottles of Scotch for that same money. So the conclusion that we came to... It always comes back to poppers. And I do have a bit of a headache coming on, so that seems appropriate. The conclusion that we came to is that in the UK, certainly, for the Japanese whiskies we tried, they were not worth the money. And all of us would prefer to stick to Scotch and Irish, in large part because of the price range, because of the pricing of them. Which is always an interesting kind of thing to decide upon, because this is our hobby for a lot. For me, this is my kind of main hobby. It's my job as well, but it's my main hobby, and so therefore there's less of a kind of a limitation for what I'm willing to spend. If I spend more, it just means I have to buy less. But I'm quite happy to buy a more expensive bottle if I think it's worth it. But these whiskies, nothing grabbed me. Nothing really grabbed me amongst these whiskies. This one I thought was probably the nicest, the most complex of it. In terms of value, the Nika Days easily wins the tasting in terms of value for money. But it just wasn't good enough when I compared it to other standard blends that I pick up here in UK, Scotch blends. Whiskies like Ballantine's or Grant's, which are whiskies that I think are superb drams, particularly for the money. Not super duper complex. Probably my most overused description is that something is not super duper complex. But it's an important thing to remember, but it's also important to remember that not all whiskies are trying to do that. So the last thing I'm going to do before I wrap up, and I'm just going to check whether I have anything left in any of the other bottles, is I'm going to try blending these in the very kind of Japanese tradition. Well, is it tradition? I don't know. But it's quite typical in Japan, as I've discussed, for them to kind of mix things together. Blending of various whiskies is a very common factor in Japanese whiskey production. So I am going to blend all of these and see what we're left with. See if we're left with something that is more interesting, is more complex. Now, of course, these have got no opportunity whatsoever to properly intermingle and to properly marry together. They're going to have all of 30 seconds of swirling in my glass in order for them to actually intermingle a little bit. So I don't expect anything to really kind of become complex, really come to the fore, but let's see what we've got. The brininess that came from the Uchiha, was it the briny one? Yeah, the brininess from the Uchiha has really come to the fore. That's one of the heaviest notes I get. There is that leather from the Nika. Trying to see if I can pick out any of that raspberry, any of those sweet raspberry notes that came from, what was raspberry-ish? I'm kind of randomly flicking through my notes here. Was it that final one that was raspberry-ish? Yeah. Raspberry on the Yamazaki. And it is there. It is there just a little bit. Let's give it a taste. It's alright. It's not great. It's become a sort of a really homogenized blend. I'll try adding just a drop of water, see if that. I think there are more brutish ones will overpower. Yes, the bigger notes have kind of overpowered things, but taste-wise, it's just a bit dull. Leathery granny. Is that a granny that's retired to the Costa del Sol and spends every single day sitting in the sun just cooking? Apologies to anybody who lives in the Costa del Sol. Whatever. Yeah, that really hasn't helped an awful lot. It's definitely not given it any complexity, that's for sure. So yeah. So overall, my view on these Japanese whiskies is that they are nice, but they don't really. No, I don't want you to elaborate. No, you're fine. They're nice, but none of these ones really did anything for me. They're not ones that make me want to run out and buy a bottle, and they're not ones that I will bother ordering in a bar. However, if you're a fan of them, then really that's all that matters. My opinion is just that. It is just my opinion. So, thank you for watching tonight. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't already joined up to the Facebook group, then head over there and join up. It's Drum Dabbler and Friends. And I will see you next time. Cheers.